morning. We begin today with the first of the material for test number 2. And we begin with Theodore Roosevelt's presidency. McKinley has just been assassinated, and Theodore Roosevelt, the youngest president thus far in U.S. history, has suddenly become president. Knowing that he had a reputation for impulsiveness and radicalism, he sought to reassure the country by proclaiming that he would carry out the policies of his predecessor. Born into a wealthy and distinguished New York family, he had fiercely built up his spindly, asthmatic body by a stern and self-imposed routine of exercise. His parents did not send him to public school because they were afraid he would be bullied. And so he was taught at home. And through self-exercise, he built up his own physical strength. He graduated from Harvard with Phi Beta Kappa honors. This was not a stupid president here. In my opinion, he is one of the brightest presidents that we had. He was published by the age of 24, the first of some 30 volumes of prose. Not just the fact that he wrote 30 volumes in his life, which was only about 60 years long. How many of you have published? Well, most of you are not 24 yet, but I am well past 24, and I haven't published anything in my life. 30 books. This man slept only a few hours a night. This man was go, 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 go. He read voraciously. He was unbelievably brilliant and interested in everything. He stood 5 foot 10 inches. He had prominent teeth, squinty eyes, droopy mustache, and a piercing voice. He gathered about him a group of athletic tennis-playing cronies who were popularly dubbed the tennis cabinet. An ardent champion of military and naval preparedness, he adopted as his pet proverb, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." This was my father's favorite proverb also. You don't rant, you don't rave, you say something once, and then bam, you get the consequence. Yes, if you have power behind you, you don't have to rant and rave. And the big stick was the U.S. military might, in particular, our U.S. Navy. Wherever Roosevelt went, there was a great stir. At the wedding, he eclipsed the bride. At a funeral, the corpse. Let me tell you, it would be so wonderful to have the President of the United States at your wedding. Imagine, you would be written up in every column. President came to so-and-so's wedding. You don't want the President at your wedding. You, the bride, are to be the center of attention at your wedding. No, wherever Teddy went, he was the center. He was a colossal egotist, and his self-confidence merged with self-righteousness. He impetuously branded people liars who disagreed with him. But TR had an enormous popular appeal, partly because the common man saw him as a fiery champion. Roosevelt believed that the president should lead. Never a lawyer, he condemned the law and the courts as too slow. He had no real respect for the delicate checks and balances amongst the 3 branches of the government. The president, so he felt, may take any action in the general interest that is not specifically forbidden by the laws and the Constitution. Cartoon of the time period. Here is Roosevelt, his prominent teeth, and his big stick, trotting on, using as a doormat the U.S. Constitution. And Congress, instead of leading the nation, he has them on strings like a puppeteer. Yes, the Constitution says what the president can do, what Congress can do, what the Supreme Court can do, but many things are left unsaid. Well, he said, hey, if it doesn't say I can't do it, I can do it. His successor, William Howard Taft, is a lawyer. He's an ingrained legalist. He will have the exact opposite perspective. If the Constitution and the laws don't say I can do it, then I can't do it. Understand the difference? Teddy says, if it doesn't say I can't do it, then I can do it. Taft says, if it doesn't say I can do it, then I can't do it. And so Teddy will greatly broaden the powers of what he feels the president can do. The unwritten Constitution. Yes, anything it doesn't say I can't do, I will do. And one of the things that he will get very involved in will be the Panama Canal. Foreign affairs absorbed much of Roosevelt's energy. Having traveled extensively in Europe, he enjoyed a far more intimate knowledge of the outside world than most of his predecessors. The Spanish-American War had emphasized a need for constructing the long-talked-about canal. Here we were conducting war with Spain with regard to Cuba, and way over in the Pacific, we were conducting war with Spain in the Philippines. And our Navy was having to go all the way around to get to the Philippines. Wouldn't it be ever so much quicker if we could launch off the East Coast, come through the Panama Canal, or a canal that we will dig through Panama, and get to Asia, shuttle our fleet back and forth through the canal, through a canal. But where should the canal be dug? Many American experts favored the Nicaraguan route. But the agents of the old French Canal Company were eager to salvage something from the costly failure in Panama. Represented by a young and unscrupulous engineer, Philippe Boinvarilla, the new Panama Canal Company suddenly dropped the price from $109 million to the bargain basement sale price of $40 million. Earlier, I had mentioned that we felt it a violation of the Monroe Doctrine, but the French had come over and decided to build, like their Suez Canal, a sea-level canal across Panama. We told them don't do it. They did it anyway. Well, due to disease, the workers died like flies as fast as you could import them. And so they had finally gone bankrupt, and their partially dug canal was left with machinery rotting in the jungle. I shouldn't say rotting, rusting in the jungle. They are trying to get some money out of their failed endeavor. And Philippe Boinvarilla says, hey, we've dug part of it, continue by our partially built endeavor, and we have dropped the price to $40 million. The Nicaragua versus Panama issue was hotly debated in Congress, where a serious objection to Nicaragua was its volcanic activity. You're saying, why in the world would you consider Nicaragua? Isn't that an ever so much longer route? Well, yes, but you've got a huge lake you're crossing, and what you can't see in this picture, there's another lake that you would cross. Apparently there was more than one proposed route. There was another route that would have gone up higher, and this map doesn't show a lake, but you would have had another lake here. So your canal would have actually strung between two lakes. So yes, you would have had canal here, you would have had canal here and here, but you do have two lakes in between that would connect it. So it's not a totally unfeasible route. The Panamanian route also has lakes. You have this huge lake which grows and decreases whether it's rainy season or dry season, but looks like you have some mountains here. You also have a huge mountain range running through Panama that you have to deal with, and so both have their obstacles, both have their benefits. But Nicaragua has volcanic activity. Meanwhile, here is Nicaragua. Over here on the island of Martinique, Mount Pelée in the West Indian island here, and an enlargement of the island of Martinique here, Mount Pelée had blown its top in May of 1902 and had wiped out some 30,000 souls. So what does Martinique have to do with Nicaragua? Nothing. But the world has suddenly realized the power of volcanoes. Just very recently, this volcano here had blown up and 30,000 people had been destroyed on the island of Martinique. So the world is very aware of what volcanic activity could do. Nicaragua, meanwhile, is a hotbed for volcanic activity. The clever Frenchman, Philippe Boinvarilla, meanwhile, he secures 90 postage stamps from Nicaragua. And this postage stamp bears a picture of Nicaragua's most fearsome volcano. Remember, folks, Nicaragua has volcanoes too. He sends one of these stamps. He buys 90 of them and sends one to each one of the U.S. senators. Now, if we were meeting in person, I would ask you, how many states are in the Union at this point? And you would say, how do I know? And I would say, I just told you. He buys 90 stamps and sends one to each of the senators. And you'd go, okay, there's 45 states. 2 senators from every state. He buys 90 stamps. 45 states in the Union at this time. So he's reminding the senators, hey, Nicaragua has on their stamps a volcano. They know they have volcanic activity. The scene now shifts down to Colombia. Why Colombia? Because Panama is a part of Colombia. If you want to put a canal through, you got to deal with the mother country. It's like if you want to do something in Texas that's a federal issue, you have to deal with the United States government. If it's a state issue, then you would have dealt with Texas. But this is something that you would have had to have dealt with Colombia. Bogota is the capital, so the United States, if we want to put a Panama Canal through, we have got to deal with the Bogota government in Colombia. But Panama was a rather, at this stage, unwilling part of Colombia. And the treaty, highly favorable to the U.S., had been negotiated in Washington with the agent of the Colombian government. When the pact was submitted to the government back in Bogota, the Senate there unanimously rejected it. They said, not enough benefit to us. Just a moment. Becca? Can I call you back? I'm in the middle of taping a lecture. No problem. Bye. Roosevelt was infuriated by this setback, eager to be elected president in his own right in 1904. Remember, he was an accidental president. He had gotten in 1901 because of the death of McKinley. Now he wants to prove to the nation, I can win in my own right. He was anxious to make the dirt fly in Panama to impress the voters. Damn the law, he reportedly cried in private. I want the canal built. Impatient Panamanians who had rebelled numerous times were now ripe for another revolt. Buenavista, working hand in glove with the Panamanian revolutionists, raises a tiny patriot army. It consisted largely of members of the Panamanian Fire Department, plus 500 bought Colombian troops for a reported price of $100,000. The Panamanian Revolution occurred on November 3rd, 1903. Apparently all you need for a revolution is some money. And you can buy the firemen and the Colombian troops. Colombian troops were gathered to crush the uprising, but American naval forces would not let them cross the isthmus. Why did U.S. naval forces just happen to be there and refuse to let Colombian forces cross over into Panama to put down the uprising? This is not our country. We have no right to stop Colombia from refusing to let Panama have a revolution. But no, remember, Roosevelt wants this canal, and if Bogota won't play his game, then an independent Panama most definitely would. And so he's going to do whatever it takes to get his canal built. Cartoon here. Philippe Boinville. He's a French citizen. What does he have any business doing this? But his interest is the French company. And if the U.S. can't buy it, he's going to do whatever it takes so the U.S. can buy the Panama Canal from his company. Colombia rejects canal treaty. 40 million for France treaty is ratified. That's what he's been promised, but not if Colombia rejects the treaty. So he's got to negotiate something else to get the money from the U.S. So he will orchestrate the revolution. American forces would not let the Colombian troops cross the isthmus. 3 days after the uprising, Roosevelt hastily extended the right hand of recognition to Panama. 15 days later, Buenavista, who is now the Panamanian minister, despite his French citizenship, signed the Hay-Boinville Treaty in Washington. Let's drop back again here. Roosevelt hastily extended the right hand of recognition to Panama 3 days after the uprising. When you recognize a nation, that is a big step. That says we say you are legit. We send our ambassadors and you send your ambassadors. We set up embassies in each other's nations. This is a political card that you play. When China became communistic after World War II, we did not recognize communist China as the legitimate government of China for, at least 20 years. We instead recognized Chiang Kai-shek's administration on the island of what used to be Formosa, then is now known as Taiwan, as the legitimate government. It would not be until Nixon's administration, I don't know how many years that is, at least 20 years, that we finally formalized relations with China and said, all right, we understand you're here to stay, and we recognize relations with Mao Zedong, and communism in mainland China is the legitimate government. Purely political. Years we did not recognize mainland China as the official government there. Here, you've got paid people creating an insurrection. The Colombians have not even had a chance to respond to it because U.S. troops are holding them off from crossing the isthmus, and we immediately, 3 days later, extend the right hand of recognition. Hello, Sister Republic. We want to welcome you into the friendship of republics. There was no reason to consider that Panama was ever going to stand on its feet solidly, that Colombia was not going to achieve its endeavor of bringing it back under the fold. This is political, a power move here. And 15 days later, we sign the Hay-Boyne-Varilla Treaty. Hay, we've seen before. Remember Hay's open door policy? He's the Secretary of State for the United States at that time, under McKinley's first term, and under McKinley's second term, and now under Roosevelt. So it's the Hay-Boyne-Varilla Treaty of 1903. And here you have a copy of it, not very long. And here you have John Hay and Philippe, just with a P, Boyne-Varilla. The price of the canal strip was $10 million. That's what we paid to Panama. We originally had tried to pay that to Colombia, and they said, the Bogota government said, not enough. You must pay us at least $25 million for the canal zone. And we had originally said 6 miles, 3 miles on each side. Now Panama says, no, you can have 5 miles on each side, a total of 10-mile strip through the middle of Panama for the $10 million. And we would continue to pay a yearly fee of $250,000 for the canal zone. Back then, $250,000 was a lot of money, and that helped to prop up the Panamanian government. By the time the time period for the 99 years or whatever for this treaty was up, $250,000 was a drop in the bucket. But in its initial stage, that 250,000 was a nice chunk of change. So the French company gladly pocketed its 40 million we promised to pay them for the partially dug canal. We paid 10 million to Panama, and for the next something like 99 years, we paid $250,000 a year to Panama. In that 10-mile wide strip, extraterritorialitarianism applied, meaning that was U.S. soil in Panama. Any crimes committed in that 10-mile strip would be tried under U.S. law. Once you crossed out of that 10-mile strip, Panamanian law applied. But within that 10-mile strip, U.S. law applied. And building the canal. Cartoons. I love cartoons. Here you have Teddy Roosevelt, and the Caribbean is like his backyard pond. And here he is wading around the backyard pond with his big stick. And what is his big stick? The U.S. Navy. And he has used that Navy in Panama. He has brought troops down to refuse to let Colombian troops cross over into Panama. And same thing here shown in this cartoon. He has used the fleet streaming out behind, big stick policy to bring Panama into a position where we could build the Panama Canal. And we will discuss this Great White Fleet in just a bit. In his earlier life, Teddy Roosevelt, who was quite bad in his eyesight, wore glasses that pinched on his nose and simply had string coming down that could go around the neck, so if it fell off, it wouldn't fall to the ground, but it would be tied to your neck. Later in life, when he is older, he will have glasses that have the piece that goes around the ear. But in early life, he always has these just clamp on the nose with the string glasses. And this is my very favorite one of the Panama Canal. This one is hilarious. Teddy wanted to make the dirt fly, and here you've got Teddy actually down here. I told you there was a huge mountain range running through Panama. And he is digging the Panama Canal, and the funniest part is, yes, the boats, the ships are all waiting to go through. And we have the new treaty achieved by the Frenchman Philippe Boinville. And as Teddy is digging, he is showing his contempt. Where is he dumping that dirt? Right there on the the Bogota government. I'll show you. I got it done anyway, and you didn't get the 10 million I was offering in the first place. You got zip. Yeah, cheeky there. And building the canal. At the outset, sanitation proved to be the most important, more so than excavation. Colonel William C. Rojas, the quiet and determined exterminator of yellow fever back in Cuba and Havana, ultimately made the canal zone as safe as a health resort. I don't know about that. We still had many workers dying of yellow fever and malaria and things. But because of experiments done by Walter Reed at the end of the Spanish-American War. We had figured out that the stigmaio mosquito was the carrier of yellow fever. And so before we brought in the workers, he had a policy, a program to exterminate the mosquitoes in the Panama Canal zone. And they went in and cleaned up breeding areas, areas where stagnant water was, and tried to eliminate areas where the mosquitoes would breed so that they could bring in the workers without fear of the disease that had killed off the French workers so horribly. Roosevelt visited the Panama Canal construction site in 1906 to actually see the dirt fly. Who visits a construction site in a white suit other than, Theodore Roosevelt? And of course have to stay clean for the pictures, but yes, got to get up there in the machinery and take a look, see what's going on. He was the first U.S. president to leave U.S. soil for foreign soil. Nowadays, that is very common. Oftentimes, several times during a year, a U.S. president will leave U.S. soil. But this was before they left by plane and all that kind of thing. So he is the first U.S. president to leave U.S. soil while in office. In 1914, the Colossus Canal was completed at an initial cost of about $400 million, just as World War I was breaking out. Can you imagine building the canal for $400 million today? Would not happen. But the dollar was very different back then, and what you paid a person for a day's work than what you pay today. So right 1914, at the start of World War I, the canal is finished, just in time. Ships transiting the canal are raised and lowered 85 feet from sea level to sea level by a system of 3 sets of locks. Now, had we have not cut the huge cut through the mountain, it would have been way more than 85 feet. We do, yes, cross the lake, which cuts down on an awful lot of canal digging. Total distance is 27 miles from one side to the other. Set of locks. You start out here, you shut this side, you shut that side, you open one side, you shut this side. You bring in the ship, and then you shut this side, and you open this side, and the water equalizes and raises. You pull the ship into this side, you shut this side, you open this, and so step by step you can go up, step by step you can go down. Another ship entering, exiting the locks. Oh, I know so much information about this. I would love to spend time telling you, but don't have the time. Here, the canal part that is just dug through the countryside. Digging through the mountain day after day. They would have the trains come in, and they would have huge cranes that you can't hardly see it here, but there is a train here on a track, and the trains would just dig and fill the cars. I don't think you can see the tracks here. They would build tracks and just haul car after car after car load of dirt away out of here as they would slowly dig deeper and deeper through the mountain pass to build their waterway. Another view of the locks here, 3 locks, sets of locks. The canals that were built at the time were built with the idea that surely they could handle any size ship we could conceive. Well, we have conceived of ships now that are larger than what can fit through the Panama Canal. And so we talk about a ship being Panamax. And when you build a ship, you have to decide in advance, do you want it to be able to go through the Panama Canal or not? And so it has to be built to certain regulations if it is going to go through the Panama Canal. As far as our military goes, our destroyers can fit through, and they are made to fit through the Panama Canal. But our aircraft carriers are too big. They cannot fit through the Panama Canal. And so for the most part, we have a 2-ocean navy. The purpose initially was to be able to shuttle our navy from one side, one ocean to the other. Now we don't. We have a 2-ocean navy on each side of our country. The Panama Canal is much more involved in trade, so that trade doesn't have to go all the way around South America. So, yes, there are ships too big to go through. When a ship enters Panama from one or other side, the Pacific or the Atlantic, the captain of the ship gives up control to a Panamanian captain who takes over at that stage. And for the time period in the canal, the captain of the ship does not pilot his ship. A Panamanian pilots it because they know the canal. And when you go through the canal here, it is hooked up to a little like tiny train that is on the sides here, and it is pulled through the locks on a little train because you don't want this thing going too fast and hitting into the doors here. But yes, the captain has to give up the bridge through the Panama Canal. And we will stop at this point and pick up with Teddy Roosevelt's corollary of the Monroe Doctrine in the next segment.